By their own standards, Seattle Reign had a pretty disastrous season last year. They were the Shield winners in 2022, they appeared in the NWSL playoff final in 2023, but in 2024, they struggled to string wins together and ended up second from bottom in the league table. I'm Bridie O'Toole, welcome back to Busy Watching Women's Soccer, and in today's video, we're going to look at the formation and tactics that have helped the Reign win in the past. We're going to assess some of their off-season signings to see where they fit into the game plan, and hopefully figure out if the Reign are going to be back on top soon. Over the last several years, the Seattle Reign have been making use of this 4-2-3-1 formation. It's essentially a flavor of a 4-3-3, where you have two defensive midfielders. The thing is, we're not going to see Seattle in this shape all that often, and that's because this is a formation that they use as a base to move into their offensive and their defensive formations. On offense, one of the main things Seattle are going to look to do is move a back up the field to support the attack. As they do this, they're going to reshuffle this back line to be a little bit more symmetrical, and we'll often see the ball side defensive midfielder will come up, and then this weak side away from the ball, they'll move a little bit more central. And what this leaves us is a very solid spine through the middle of the structure, which helps keeps things compact and defensive if things were to transition. The other thing accomplished by moving this back up is it creates this triangle inside the structure that can move together to support play. Here's what the offense looks like in action, and if we pause it, we can see that spine running through the middle, and we can also pick out that triangle there in support. Things are going to move really quickly on this play, but we're going to see how little the formation and the structure changes, so we're kind of doing things in an ideal manner here. On defense, the Reign are typically using a 4-2-4 structure, and what that will look like is just evening up this forward line here a little bit, so having your attacking midfielder become more of a forward. What this structure really does well is it controls the inside of the pitch. These six folks here create a pretty big, boxy block, and it gets really difficult to move through the middle. The other thing that's really cool with this structure is they'll use these wingers and these outside backs to really come and join the press, and we'll often see these folks pull up like this to create even more of a blockage in there. I find it easiest to see the defensive structure on kickoff, so here we're starting to see that group of four emerge at the top, and the other thing you're going to start noticing is what happens when the ball goes to the wide areas of the pitch. We start seeing the wingers and the outside backs get involved in pressing. So right here, we're going to see the left back come up, and that means that whoever's acting as a midfielder, controlling the midfield, doesn't really have to move out to those wide areas to do anything. Similar thing here, but I think this zoomed out view gives you a good picture of what's happening with the two in the middle. So Lavelle has now joined that top to become the group of four, and we can start to see the two midfielders of Fishlock and Sonnet starting to emerge there, and there we have it, our 4-2-4 structure, and you see how compact and condensed it was. One thing that often makes this defensive structure not look like a 4-2-4 is the role that the striker, Jordan Heidema, is doing. So we can see that she's pretty far separated from everybody else, and that's because she has so much pressing responsibility. She's going to be pressing the goalkeeper, she's going to be pressing the center back, she's going to be pressing out wide. It's a system that requires a lot from the striker, and this is going to be a little important for us later on. Now that we understand the formation the Reign is using, let's look at the tactics that they've layered into their game. The first thing that comes across clear as day on film is how much they like to use the wide areas. In this example, we're going to see what's called an overlapping run. That's what the arrow is there. It's the overlap on the outside of Rapinoe, and that's actually the outside back getting involved in play, coming up the field and helping drive the attack. Here's another example. We've got a player with the ball in the wide area. We're going to see an overlapping run from a right back, and that helps fuel the attack. Another thing that stood out to me on film is how happy the Reign are to have multiple players occupy the same wide channel. Some teams don't want to do this because they're going to feel things are going to get a little clogged. Here in this example, we're going to see Rapinoe offer that same overlapping run on the outside. Heidema opts not to take that, but we see demarcation for the wide area here, and as Heidema comes in, it's not a cue for Rapinoe to leave. She's actually still staying in support, still staying involved in this play, and Heidema actually brings the ball even further back before Pino brings it in. So they're obviously very happy with that setup. So what's the point of constantly trying to get players and the ball into these wide areas? Well, you may have picked up on it already, but the Seattle Reign love to cross the ball. Now, it's a high difficulty finish, but that also makes it a high difficulty save. And sometimes with crossing, even when things go wrong, they go right. It's just magnificent when it works out. It's beautiful to watch, and clearly, gorgeous crosses are part of the Seattle Reign DNA. I also think it's worth talking about how the Reign are pushing the ball upfield to be in position to cross so often. A really key part of the Reign system is these long passes that are going to be played by center backs and the outside backs. They're looking to push really long balls and distribute upfield and into wide areas because it gets them upfield quickly, but it's also a pretty low-risk play. We're going to see here someone's offside, there's a bad touch. It really doesn't matter because the ball's in an area where if you turn it over, there's not all that much risk involved. And what I think is actually really interesting is even when the Reign have possession in the opponent's half, they're still looking to distribute in this manner. And in fact, the Reign have been in top 3 team in the league for the last 3 years running the long passes attempted. 2022, they had 1,753 long passes attempted, and then last year they topped the league with 1,876 long passes attempted. We're starting to get a sense that this team wants to distribute the ball quickly, get upfield quickly, and make aggressive attacking plays from the wide areas. Something I think the Reign do exceptionally well, though, is flipping that all on its head at the appropriate time. Earlier when we talked about the Reign's defensive formation, we talked about how good it is at controlling the middle area of the pitch. And what this means is if the team are able to create turnovers, they can move very aggressively through the middle of the pitch. And we're going to see on this example here how quickly and how effectively they're able to transition after a turnover. The 4-2-4 mid-block is very effective at leading to these transitional chances, and the Reign have been slicing and dicing people up the middle of the pitch for years and years. It's a really great tactical wrinkle that the Reign have added to their game. It's a fantastic thing to be able to show one thing on film and then to be able to break that tendency and do something completely different at will and very quickly. Now that we understand the tactics, we can talk about what went wrong last season a little bit. And in my book, honestly, it's pretty straightforward. The team was going through an ownership change and there probably wasn't much appetite to invest in the roster long term. We saw an absolute decimation of the team. Rapinoe left, Lavelle left, and Sonnet left, all before the season even started. Midway through the season, things are still a little bit rocky, and I think because of the ownership changes, we saw some players come in, some players go out, and through that, we saw Huerta and Cook leave as well. So this roster now looks completely different from what Seattle Reign went into the, OL Reign went into the 2023 NWSL final with. Since the end of the most recent season, there's been even more turnover. A lot of these subs didn't work out as starters and they've been released. And even some of the transfers from midseason have been let go. Jalen Howell was traded, but she was traded for the monstrous signing that is Lynn Williams. Remember when we talked about defense earlier and we talked about all the pressing that Jordan Heidemann has to do? Well, that role is probably going to go to Lynn Williams, and guess what? It's one of the things that she might be the best in the world at. She is a really aggressive presser. She's a speed demon. She positions herself really well, and she's just able to get under people's skin. You're going to see her create a lot of turnovers, and it's not even necessarily her winning the ball back. It's just her applying pressure so well that it forces a crappy pass that someone else is going to go and collect. She's even good at helping clean up after her teammates. We're going to see here where a poor pass actually ends up turning into a one throw just because of her press. So at this point, Seattle is super familiar with Lynn Williams' pressing ability because they've been burned by it several times. But Lynn Williams' ability on the press is really just an added bonus. Everyone knows what she's been brought in for, and that is to score goals. She is not just a goal scorer, she is the goal scorer, the league's leading goal scorer. What you're going to see from all these clips is she puts herself in good positions and she executes quickly and instinctively. She's not afraid to score ugly goals, and she's not afraid to put her body on the line. And what that equals is wins. Law of averages, these are just going to go in eventually. And perhaps the biggest victory for Seattle Reign is not having to play against Lynn Williams for another season. The other signing that I think is going to have a big impact on this team, slightly less known name, is Madison Curry. She was a rookie with Angel City last year, coming out of Princeton as a neuroscience major. And you can just tell she is a smart person because she makes really smart plays. She has a really good read on the game, really good anticipation, and we're just going to see clips and clips of her coming up for good tackles and good interceptions because she has a great understanding of how the play is progressing. Curry looked pretty good in her one-on-ones for a rookie. I think as the quality of the opposition increased, we could see the difficulty level ramp up for her, and there were sometimes challenges. On this example with G, we're going to see a little bit of a mistake here as she goes to move the ball out. She then ends up chasing a little bit and getting caught behind, but I think she has a nice recovery here, and it was kind of the theme that I saw from her is that, it doesn't always go well the first time, but she recovers nicely. On offense, there are a lot of promising signs. I liked these attempted long passes, but I would see her play. They're not completing, but I'm not all that worried about this because I talked about it from an attempt perspective earlier with the rain because it doesn't really matter too much what the outcome is because of the risk associated with this strategy. And the main thing I like to see is that she's willing to push the ball up forward on these kind of seeking opportunities. A lot of young players don't want to. I would love for Veronica to bring more crossing into her game. There was very little of that on film, despite the fact that Angel City used her as a left back, a center back, a right back. I think she fits in perfectly here at right back. It's not the world's most beautiful cross, but you didn't really have anybody in the spot anyway. She seems pretty capable with both feet, but I just think she's right-footed. And look, she's just willing to get involved in the attack, and surely that is what Seattle are looking for one of their new outside backs. I think Williams and Curry are excellent signings that are going to fit in really well with Seattle's game plan. Now, we talked a little bit about some of the roster changes the team made last season, but I think this season they're going to get credit for some of the very good under-18 signings they made last year. Jordan Bugg joined Bahrain towards the end of last season, but she was actually one of the key players at helping the U.S. under-20 women's team win bronze at the Women's World Cup. I can't show you clips from that event, but I will tell you it's very polished film. It looks just like a stepped-up version of what we've got here, where she looks pretty solid and confident on defense. I think there's a lot to come from her next season. Ameria Adames is the other player that I think could have a breakout season. She actually tied the record for most assists in an under-20 Women's World Cup match, and while I can't show you those assists, I can show you where they came from, and you might be starting to get the sense that she's kind of a bit of a specialist. And if a left-footed crossing specialist sounds all too familiar, well, that might be because it is. The Reign want to stick with the tactics they know, but they're looking for the next generation of players to execute. Between the free agent signings and a potential breakout season for one of the Reign's young players, I think the recipe for a winning season is there. The biggest hole I see in this roster is a defensive midfielder, and I think the team are going to be looking for somebody with a lot of consistency and technicality over the coming days and weeks. If we don't see that signing made, I think this team is going to remain competitive, but I think ultimately they're going to be looking to finish as a 1, 2, 3, 4 seed, and I think that's going to be really difficult without patching that hole in the spring or summer transfer window. But hey, let me know what you think. I'm sure a bunch of you have been following the Reign far more closely than I have, and I would love to hear from you. I'd love to know what you think the holes are, or just how happy you are to see some of them patched up.